all is good and we're able to pass data from A to B and life is good. But how about passing the other way around? So if we want to get stuff from activity B, showcase in this case, and go back to main activity, how do we do that? Well, the thing is it's different right now, right? Because we no longer just go inside and set intent and get on all that stuff, but we have to make sure that activity A, the main activity here, is able to register itself to listen to something that may be coming to it from a different activity, if that makes any sense. Likely, Android has a method we can use, we can override, I should say, that will allow us to listen to make sure that, first of all, main activity is going to be listening at all times, right, for something to happen to it, in which case we'll then retrieve that data. Okay, so that is a protocol, if you will, that exists within the Android ecosystem, right? So it allows us to put together these override methods that will facilitate the process that we want, in this case, to retrieve something that may be coming from somewhere else, from a different activity, back to us. So outside of our onCreate, I'm going to go and say Command N here. What we want to do is actually we want to override methods. So click override methods, and I'm going to look for onActivity result, onActivity result, like that. So click on that, hit enter. And the moment you do that, voila, we have all this information. Now, this onActivity result here, again, it's override method, meaning it comes from activity class, right? Just like other classes that we've seen. It requires us to pass a few things: int request, result code, and of course the actual intent value. Okay, that has to be passed inside of our activity result so that the system knows how to deal with all that stuff. Now, what is this stuff? Well, int request is just the code that we can create our own code so that internally in Android, it knows exactly to know, okay, whenever I need to request or to send something, the request code is going to be this one. So it's going to be a number we're going to create in a second here. The actual result code is going to be another internal, actually OS, or in this case, the operating system internal protocols that will let us know that indeed the result that we're going to be receiving, it's okay to be received and to be passed around. Okay, that's all internal. You will see in a second here. And of course, the intent data is, just the data that we're going to be receiving. Okay, now this @nullable thing, it just says that this can be nullable. So we have some annotations here, which we don't need to go into right now, but that is what's happening here. So on activity result, that is indeed where we're going to be able to fetch whatever may be happening or may be coming from a different activity. All right. So the first thing I need to do actually is at the top here, I'm going to create our request code. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to make it a final. So we're going to pf public int final. I'm going to say private int final. And I'm going to call this a request code, but I'm going to make all of it caps. So I'm going to say request code. And I'm going to give it 2, something like that. I think private final int. Like that. That's how it's supposed to be. Okay, so this is the request code that's going to work as the IDE for our request, as you saw here at the bottom. Okay, very good. So once we have that, we're going to stop for now because we need to go to the actual show guess. So the idea, in fact, let's go to our view here. The idea is that we could add a button here so that when they click, we go to the previous button. But what are we going to do? Actually, I'm going to show you something really cool. If you look at all of these views, okay, all of these widgets, they all belong to the view class. That's why text view says text view. But button as well is a type of view, meaning it inherits from the view class. So the view class is this Android class that most, if not every class out there that we can use that shows something inside of our main view here inherits from. All right. With that in mind, if a text view inherits from a view, a button also inherits from view. That means certain things that a button can do, a view, in this case, text view, can also do. Which means I can actually attach an on-click listener to this text view, even though we can't see it. Which means I can come to show guess here. We have a text view here. I can come at the bottom here if I want. I can say show guess text view dot set on-click listener, new on-click listener, enter, and voila. Amazing. So I can do such thing. So here I'm going to create another intent so that when I click, it's going to take me back to main activity, and I'm going to pass a message to the previous activity, in this case, main activity. So I'm going to create an intent here. I'm going to say intent. I'm going to say is equal to get intent. So it's just going to get this intent we have inside of this activity here, right? Good. So once we have this intent, we can just put stuff. I can say that, put extra, just like we did before. I'm going to say message underscore back. So that's our key. And I can add a message here. Say from second activity. There we go. Now here's the kicker here. We no longer have to do the start activity and pass the intent here because that's not what we're doing. We actually want to go backward, which means in order for us to conform to this protocol that we put together, because in main here we have this on activity result, so we need to pass a set result method. So I'm going to say set result request or set result here. Right? So there's two set results methods we can use. I'm going to use the second one here. Notice this one requires for us to pass the result code. So this result code again is an internal that I can say, okay, this data is indeed ready to be passed on to the previous activity. So because this is actually a final, because this result code here is actually internal from Android, it is a final type, right? Meaning you can't change, just like we did with this request code here, right? We can actually invoke it inside here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a caps here. Say result, I want this to be okay. So what this says the system, hey, this is indeed okay result to be sent to the previous activity. And also I need to pass the actual data, right? I'm going to pass the intent that we created earlier at the top here. This intent which has message back. Okay? That is the difference here. Now, once we do that, because remember, we're not using start activity, we're not really starting an activity. We need to close this current activity, right? Because we want to go back to the previous one. So to do that, we can actually call another method called finish, right? If you go say finish, there we go. It's going to go and just take this activity away from the stack. Because as we call other activities, showing other views, other windows, okay, other screens, what happens is that Android starts stacking all of these activities on top of each other. So when we call finish, we're just going to pop out of this stack, and then of course it's going to show the previous activity. But now it will know, because we're setting the result okay and we're passing intent, the first activity main will know, oh, okay, we'll go ahead and call this activity result, because it is indeed waiting for a result for us to catch and do something here. Okay? Now here's another catcher, because this whole protocol has a process, okay? We said here, go back to main, when we start this activity, we just said, hey, just start activity and go to the next activity. That's totally fine. And in return, we're able to figure out and get all the items from our extra bundles and so forth. We did that already. But here's the problem. If we come back to main activity here, the way things are right now, this activity does not know exactly what is going on in terms of whether this activity should expect anything, even though we said that, hey, on active result, something must happen. But all of this is tied together by how we started everything. Meaning, if I just say start activity like this, it's going to work perfectly, but it will not register that this activity should start and wait for a result. So instead of start activity like that, every time we want to make sure that this works here, so this activity also later on activates this activity result, we have to specify to say, hey, instead of just start activity, I'm going to call this start activity for result like that. All right. We need to pass the intent. Let's go back here. You can see, as you can see, we can pass intent. So I'm going to say intent, but also we have to pass the request code. Well, what is the request code? Well, we created this request code at the top here, right? There's a final. That means it can never be changed. It's just a code. It could be 100, could be 3,000, doesn't matter. Right? So this is the code is going to say, oh, okay, I understand. The code that tells me that this is indeed starting for result activity. It's not just a normal activity. We are expecting, if something happens, to receive something inside of our own activity result. All right? Things still work as things are right now. No problem. But now we need to work inside of activity result here because we have set up the protocol that will allow us to actually get something back from our guest activity here. So going back here, now inside of our own activity result, we can check for things because we want to make sure that whatever we are receiving for protection, it actually is part of the protocol and is part of these activities that we are putting together here. Because the last thing you want to happen is to not have a security where any activity of any malicious app that happens is able to actually get caught here or retrieve information from your application. Okay. So in this case, we're going to put an if statement here and we'll say if, okay, this request code here, request code is equal to the request code that we created at the top, right? Then things are going to happen if this is true. We want to make sure that this is a request code that on activity, when it comes in, it's going to be that equal to that request code, then we're good. However, we also have the result code. The result code is going to be this result OK here that we are passing to make sure, okay, everything is good to be passed back to that activity. So we have to say if, indeed, request code is also equal to result OK, then we are ready to go. All right. So in this case here, I can then get the data that we're receiving because everything is set up correctly. Okay. So now we can just get the data because that will have all the information that we passed here. Ah, very good. So I can put it in a string and say string message is equal to data dot get string extra like that and pass, I think it was message. What did we call it? Message back. Okay, there we go. So I can come here and make a toast. Main.this, that's our context. And I'm going to pass our message. And then I'm going to say toast. And then I'm going to show it. So let's go ahead and run this. So we're going to say guesser. And next, there we go. Let's click back. And it seems like nothing is really showing here. Let's see. It's always false. So let's get rid of this condition here. It seems like this condition is not really helping us. So I'm going to cut all of this and get rid of all of that because that is just not necessary. That's why we're getting issues there. Now, the other thing too, you can say the get string extra may produce a null pointer here. So I can go ahead, probably wants to add an assert data null. So click there. It's just going to go assert that data is not null, meaning whatever we're receiving is not null. Okay. So this is a different assertion, a different kind of checking point here to make sure that data is never null for this to work. All right, there we go. So in this case here, I think we should be able to get this to run. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to put something here again. Go to next. Let's click. And voila, from second activity is now showing there. Okay, so we're able to get stuff from the second activity back to the first activity. All right, so there we go. This was a little extra thing I wanted to show here that comes very handy because you may have asked, so okay, we're able to get something from activity A to activity B, but how about getting it back? It can be a little bit verbose, but at least you are able to see it's not as bad as one may think it to be. All right, so the most important thing here is that we have to put the protocol in place. Make sure that we say start activity for result and pass the request code, which is just any code that we create at the top here, right? Could be 100, could be 3000, doesn't matter, okay? And then, of course, we have to override the onActivity result, which will then we have to make sure that the request code is equal to the request code we made this to be. And then, in this case, we have to assert to make sure the data that comes in is not null, okay? And then we just go and get the message, as we did before with just normal intents. Okay, there we go. And of course, do not forget, we have, of course, here to put the extra as we did before, nothing new, but the result, we have to say set result and passing in this value from Android. We didn't create this one, result OK. It's a final attribute, result OK, that says, you know what, it's all good. We can set this result that is going to be shown on the first activity. It's all good, there's no problem. And of course, then we pass our intent there. And of course, call the finish, because if you don't, then we're not going to get rid of this current, which is the second activity, in which case we're not going to be able to see what's behind it, which is the first activity. All right, folks, thank you so much. And of course, you know that you can put more items in this extra here, just like we did before. So everything else is exactly as we did before, except a few things that we have to follow here, the protocol that we have to follow that I've just told you about. All right, folks, thank you so much for taking the time and for working hard. And I hope you are enjoying this course. If you are, please don't forget to always give us the feedback and the rating of this course. That way we know that we're doing a good job. All right, thank you so much. I'll see you next.